right? Can everyone hear me? Do I need to wear it a little higher? I'm not used to working these things. I got the mom voice. I usually just project really loudly so all can hear in my house, but this is much bigger than my living room, so I'm going to use the mic today. Also, I'm really tired. I've been working with 2-year-olds all morning, and if any of you have ever been around 2-year-olds or know a 2-year-old, they're quite the energy suckers. So anyway, the official title of my talk is Living as a Christian Woman in a Muslim Majority City. But I think in order to talk more about that, I really need to talk a little bit about our ministry so you know where I'm coming from as a woman who, at the age of 24, gathered up her husband and her 1-year-old son and moved 10,000 miles away to study Arabic. So for the first thing I want to talk about is exploring the possibility of going overseas and serving over there. So the first thing we did is we talked to our church, we talked to somebody that we knew, and we got to visit Jordan for a few days and see what Jordan is like. This was a really interesting story. We flew into Jordan, we got there really, really late at night. We were both super tired. Our son was on this crazy schedule. He was about 4 months old. He didn't know if it was daytime or nighttime. We were exhausted. And we found out we were there the first day of Ramadan. So for those of you who don't know, Ramadan is a time of fasting for people in the Muslim community. And so they fast during the day, but at night they have a time where they break the fast, and it's usually a time of fellowshipping with their friends and their family. It's a time of celebration. So, and that continues from one moon cycle to the next, and then they have a break called the Eid, which is the feast time. So we arrived on the first night of Ramadan, and we had no idea that it was Ramadan, but there was this huge banquet set out at the hotel where we were staying. And Dwayne and I were like, we're tired, we're kind of hungry, we don't know what to do. Our son's kind of squirming and cranky because he doesn't, again, know what time it is. It's an 8-hour difference between here and Jordan. And so this waiter comes over and he says, your son, can I take him for you? And we're like, yes. So we handed off our 4-month-old to this really, really nice man who took him and he took him around the restaurant and took him back so he could meet the cooks and everything like that. And for those of you who've seen my son, he's really tall now, but back then he was long blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and they were just so sweet with him while we were trying to just take a minute to breathe and eat and just have some relaxation time, so we really appreciated that. So when we had a meeting, we met this family. This is Matt and Maeve. They're some good friends of ours, and they talked about, well, if you want to serve in the Muslim world, the first thing you need to do is probably to learn Arabic is the best thing to do. So we started going to a school for foreigners who wanted to serve in the Christian community and do that among Arab Christians. Has Dwayne talked about Arab? He probably hasn't talked about that because he's been talking about historical stuff. So the Arab Christian population, there is an Arab Christian population in the Middle East. I think Jordan, I want to say it's about 3% of the population. Israel, Palestine, it's a little bit higher, but in Egypt, it's about 10%, mostly Coptic Christians. But there is a Christian presence in the Middle East, and one of the things we wanted to do was to help out our brothers and sisters over there. So we went to a language school in Jordan that caters to Christians who want to learn Arabic. We spent 2 years there. And then we moved on to, there's Jordan, okay. So these are some pictures from Jordan. You might recognize the picture on your right. If any of you have seen Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, that's That's the facade of the treasury in Petra, and it's a very famous structure there. And these are some, down below on your left-hand side, those are some friends of ours. We're eating at a Yemeni restaurant. There was one Yemeni restaurant in Jordan. And so we went there and tried out some delicious Yemeni food. It was very good. They use a lot of spices, so the Texan in me was very happy. I like spicy. Okay. And in the upper left, in the left corner, that's a mosque that we always drove by on our way to the airport. It was right outside of the city, and it's just a very pretty mosque. So after that, after 2 years in Jordan, we moved to Israel. Now, like I said, in Israel, there is an Arab population in Israel. Some of them are Muslims, some of them are Christians, and most of the Christian population lives in the Galilee area, so Nazareth and some of the surrounding towns in that area. So we lived there for 5 years, and my husband was working at a seminary there that helped Arab Christian men and women who wanted to serve in the church learn, do theology and stuff like that. And he worked there for 5 years teaching that. And down below, you can see in the lower left-hand corner, this is one of our students. My husband's in the far background there, but that's our president of our seminary with one of our students. He was actually a refugee from South Sudan, and they had many Sudanese refugees come in and stay in Israel for a time. And during that time, some of the Christian Sudanese came to the president of the seminary and said, we want to learn more. We want to study the Bible more. And so the seminary developed this whole program for the Sudanese Christians so that they could learn and study when they went back to their home country and went back to their villages. They could build churches and start churches in their villages. So that was one thing we did. That's the picture on the upper right. That is the view from our veranda outside. So I got a nice look over the city. And on the left-hand side, that is the basilica in the city of Nazareth. And that's the Roman Catholic Basilica. It's the largest church building in the Middle East. And it is so fascinating to be there. They have some beautiful pictures of Mary and baby Jesus from all over the world. And if you look at them, you see that the Korean Madonna and Jesus, they actually look Korean. And the picture from Thailand, the mother of Jesus and Jesus are dressed in traditional Thai dress. So it's this really neat depiction of how different cultures and different countries view Mary and Jesus. The last picture down here on your lower right is a group of Filipino women who lived in Tel Aviv. And again, they came to the seminary saying, we want to do some scriptural study. We want to learn the Bible more. So my husband and his friend Phil, they went down there every week and taught for several sessions and helped these women because they're leaders and in their church among the women there. So they were really excited to have some biblical training as well. Okay. So a couple of things that I did when we were living in Nazareth, I worked with a lot of the kids down there. You can see my daughter Amelia. She's only 5 years old in this picture, and two of our neighbor girls. We worked with a lot of the kids in the area. We had summer camps every summer, and not just in Nazareth, but there are little villages kind of surrounding Nazareth. And we would go to these villages and we'd go for a week and put on a summer camp for the kids. So we'd do Bible stories and play games, and we'd have activities and crafts, and pretty similar to what you'd see at VBS or something like that. And we did that for a couple of years. I really enjoyed doing that. This over here on your right is a picture of a gathering of our church. We had a big get-together at a kibbutz. It's actually multi-faith kibbutz, and so they have Jewish and Muslim and Christian workers there working in the kibbutz. And they do like a reconciliation ministry between the faiths. So that was what we were doing. We were attending a church service there. And above, on the left-hand side, that is a picture of 3 people who I had the pleasure of singing with and a choir. We got to sing for 2 years with a group that translated Handel's Messiah into Hebrew. The director really had a heart for reaching the Hebrew people in their own language, or the Israelis in their own language, in their native tongue. So he spent several years translating and getting it to fit the music, and we had a chance to perform that when we lived there. And these are just some more pictures of some of our friends that we've met over the years. The top right corner, that's our friend Omar and his wife Rahme. When we first moved to Jordan, Omar was the first friend that we made. He lives outside of the city of Amman in a little town called Salt. We actually met him in San Antonio. He was at the Defense Language Institute and doing some training with the military here. And so we got to know him. We got together with him a couple of times while he was in San Antonio. And then when we moved to Jordan, he said, "Hey, I'm getting married. We're having an engagement party. Come out to my village and come to the party." And we had been in Jordan maybe for about 2 months at that time. And we got there, and all of a sudden my husband was whisked away with this group of men to go to the men's party. And I was there with 2 months of Arabic under my belt with a bunch of women that spoke very little English. And I was like, what am I going to do for the next 3 or 4 hours? I don't know any of these women. I've never met them before. But it was really funny. We found one girl who spoke a little bit of English, and I spoke a little bit of Arabic, and we kind of went back and forth, and we were able to have a conversation and talk and have a good time, and just really, I ended up really enjoying myself. I'm not a very extroverted person. My husband, he'll just go off, and he's never met a stranger. My son is the same way, but it's really hard for me to be that bold. And I really appreciate the women who are there, who were so welcoming and really hospitable to me, despite the language barrier and the cultural barrier there. On the upper left-hand side, that's an Iraqi family that lived close to us in Jordan. They were there as refugees. They're actually now in the United States on the East Coast. And we met Radwan, the one on the far right, while we were walking through our neighborhood. Dwayne would just go by and say hello to him because, you know, we're from Texas. We say hi to everybody when we're walking down the street. And one day Radwan stopped him and he says, "Hey, why are you always saying hi to me? Nobody says hi to me here because I'm an Iraqi refugee and I have no status in this country." So over the course of time, we actually got to know Radwan and his family and hear their story and become friends with them. And also his sister is an amazing cook. She taught me a lot of Iraqi recipes and how to make Jordanian food. It was amazing. Dwayne's also done a lot of travels since we've gotten back to the States. He's been to Turkey several times. Over here on the right-hand side, this is a group that he worked with while he was in Turkey a couple of years ago. And this woman here, this radiant woman, Rania, she is from Tunisia, and she works with the Amazigh. The Amazigh are a native Berber people in Tunisia, so they're not Arab, they're not Greek or French or anything like that. They're the indigenous people, and so she works a lot with them doing humanitarian stuff and kind of advancing their cause. And stuff like that. She's a really, really dynamic woman. Okay. So a lot of questions I get about me and while I was overseas was did I have to wear the hijab? And I will say that in Jordan and Israel, there are a lot of Muslim women who don't wear the hijab. It's very common for people to not wear it or to wear it. The Christian women there don't, but there are other countries where if there's a Christian woman there, she would cover her head. We had a friend who worked in Yemen, and she worked at a language school, and in Yemen it would be very unwise for her to walk around without at least a scarf covering her head, so she did that out of respect to the culture and where she was. But in places like Oman and Israel, Palestine, it's a little bit different. We did have one group of girls that we knew who lived in a different part of Oman. So Oman is a really interesting city. It's kind of divided about right down the middle between the western side and the eastern side. The western side is very influenced by the West. There are a lot of embassies there. It's definitely the more middle upper class part of town. So it's a lot different than the eastern part, which was traditionally more rural and also traditional. So they lived in East Amman, and they would cover their head when they would go into East Amman, just out of respect for the people there, because most of the people there did not, or did cover their head. Okay. And what was my day-to-day life like? Well, I did a lot of the same things you guys do here. I went grocery shopping, I took my kids to school, and I did have to speak in Arabic most of the time, which was very challenging, especially in the beginning. When we lived in Jordan, we spent 2 years there learning the language. And just toward the end, I was like, okay, I'm finally getting the feel for how this language goes. And then we moved to Israel, Palestine, and the dialect there is a little bit different from the dialect in Jordan. It's not a huge difference, but there is a difference there. So the Israeli Arabs like to throw a lot of Hebrew words into their vocabulary. So they would be talking, I'd understand them, then there's this word that I'd never heard before in my life because it was a Hebrew word. So I sometimes had to feel it. I felt like I was learning two languages at the same time. Another interesting thing about Arabic is that the written language and the spoken language are often very different. So you could go to Egypt, and the word for want that they use in their everyday dialect is different than the word for want in Saudi Arabia, which is different from the word in Iraq, which is different from the word in Jordan. It just changes as you go around. And then the written word might be something completely different. And it's just how Arabic has evolved over the centuries. It's fascinating language. But yeah, sometimes I felt like I was trying to learn two languages to speak to people. But one of the things I found was that the Arab women in my neighborhoods, both in Jordan and Israel, whether they were Muslim or Christian, were very, very hospitable people. Arab people are so hospitable, and they are so welcoming. I remember one time I was walking in my neighborhood in Jordan, and my son, who was about 1.5 years at the time, he saw some kids playing in somebody's garden. He just ran over, opened the fence, rushed right into their neighborhood or into their garden and started playing with them. And I was a little bit embarrassed because he had just basically invited himself in. And so I went in and I told the woman, "I'm sorry, my son, he saw your children." And she's like, "Oh no, it's no problem. Please come sit and have tea and talk with me." Now, I don't know about you, but does that happen very often in the States? Where somebody you've never met and your kid just kind of goes over in their house and they're like, "Yeah, come in, have tea." Usually they say, "Yeah, here's your kid and we'll see you around," and then you never talk. But I found just time and time again, anytime I crossed paths with people, they would invite me over, and I got to the point where I was actually confident enough to invite other people over to my house and have them over for tea or coffee and just sit down and chat and get to know each other. How were you treated by the local population, both men and women? Were you able to share your faith? I think there were many opportunities that I had to have dialogue with other women about about what I believe and what they believe. I had a friend named Zainab, and she worked at the Islamic bookshop very close to our house. And Dwayne had met her, and he said, I think you should go talk to her. It's probably more appropriate if you develop a relationship with her. And so I went over there one day. I guess business was a little bit slow, and so we sat down, and she said, well, I need help with my English. Can you help me, because I'm studying to take the English exam? And I said, yeah, sure, I'll help you, but we can just hang out and talk. And so we got to know each other, and at one point she said, have you ever been in the mosque before? And the mosque was right across the street. And I said, no, I haven't been inside. And she said, well, let me take you. So I got something to cover, a scarf to cover my head, and we went up to the place where the women pray, because traditionally the men pray on the ground floor and the women pray. There's like a balcony where the women can go and pray as well. And so she took me up to the balcony, and she showed me how they set out their mats and how they do their prayers. And I said, well, we have a prayer that we know as Christians. Can I share it with you? Can I say it here? And she said, yeah, of course. So I said the Lord's Prayer, because that was the only prayer I knew in Arabic at the time. And when you think about it, the words in the Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread, forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Your kingdom come, your will be done. All of these elements is actually just such a beautiful prayer, and that was one of the things she said. She said, that's such a beautiful prayer. I'd love for you to teach that to me. So I got a chance to share with her the Lord's Prayer, which was really special. How did you make friends given the language and cultural barriers? I will say that the first year that we lived in Jordan was probably one of the hardest years of my life. The language was challenging. I didn't always understand what was going on. My husband was able to actually meet several men who spoke English well enough that they could sit around and have conversations and stuff. It was a lot harder for me to find a woman who knew enough English to sit down and speak with her. So I just had to keep trying with my Arabic and making mistakes and saying ridiculous things and getting the words for bridge and carrot mixed up, because they're very similar phonetically. And so, but over time, I was able to kind of come out of my shell and not be so afraid anymore about what I was saying or what I was doing, because first of all, I had kind of gotten the hang of the language, and second of all, I was with other people who were also making a lot of the same mistakes in the language, and so I didn't feel so alone. What did I do about my kids' education? So in Jordan and also in Israel, to be able to attend the public schools, you have to be a resident, and we were not residents. We were there on temporary visas. So when my kids were young, in Jordan it wasn't a big deal because they were not school age, but in Israel, we actually had a Baptist school that my kids attended. It was right down the road, and it's a pretty large school, and I was a little concerned about sending my kids to school in Arabic when we didn't really use Arabic at home that much. We would speak a little bit in Arabic, especially if we had friends coming over, but it wasn't something we did all the time. So I was a little bit nervous, but kids, they learn languages so much faster than we do as adults. It was amazing to hear the difference in my children's language abilities after just 6 months being at school and speaking with the kids and listening to the teachers and everything like that. So and then we got to the point where my son's education was getting so complicated in Arabic that I really wasn't able to help him. I could help him with math and English and even his science, but his reading was getting really hard, and it was beyond my reading level in Arabic is about a second grade level. I discovered I don't really read any better than a second grader. So once he hit that third grade mark, we needed a tutor. But again, we were able to find somebody local to help with that. All right. what was the easiest or most difficult thing living there? Like I said, the first year was very hard for me, and I struggled a lot with, should we be here, and are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? And I just feel like I'm not getting the language. Dwayne, as you know, he also speaks Spanish in addition to English, so he has that background of learning another language at a young age. So he actually took off in Arabic really quick, and I was much slower going. And I remember getting really frustrated. I just couldn't retain the vocabulary and make the steps that he was making initially. By the end of the time of our program, we were in the same class together, and we were about at the same level. I discovered that he can talk your ear off about God and religion and theology, but if he has to go to the grocery store, he doesn't know the words to say for things like parsley and cilantro. But I knew that. So I just found that our vocabulary different. And also, when I hung out with women, we generally didn't talk about theology and religion. We talked about cooking and our children, and I had the vocabulary for that. So yeah, that was kind of a challenge. But also, another thing that you probably imagine, being far away from your family is always hard, and being away from your friends, and being away from the food that you love. But one of the things I loved about being in the Middle East is they have such a variety of foods, and I really enjoyed trying all of them and learning how to make new dishes. So I think that's the. And I know I didn't go very long. I'm so sorry. What time do we have? It's like 7:30. 7:30. Okay. So I'll go ahead and open up the time for some questions if you guys have any more. So please. Yes.
Did you ever feel in danger or afraid?
A lot of people have asked us that. I want to say it was November of 2005 or 2006, I can't remember. There was actually a bombing in Jordan, and several of the hotels were attacked. And these were all, I think there was like a Muslim wedding going on at one of them. There was like another, like a business event at another one. It was really horrific, and one of the hotels was just up the street from us. And I remember we were hanging out, we heard all of these sirens and everything going past our house, and we weren't even knowing what was going on. And then Dwayne got an email from a friend of ours saying, "Are you okay? I just heard the news." And we were like, "What happened?" We didn't even know that had happened just a few blocks from our house. But even at that time, when you would think I would be the most scared and thinking, we need to go home right now, I am not doing this anymore, I'm done. That was actually the time where God gave me the most peace and said, you're here for a reason. I've called you here, I want you here, and I will protect you. So from then on, I didn't worry as much about that. And I definitely have some friends who have been to much more dangerous countries than I have been. And still, you have to do what God calls you to do first and trust that He's going to take care of things in His own way.
Did you feel safe by yourself out going to the grocery store and or the market or whatever?
Oh, yeah. Our neighborhood was very walkable and easy to walk around. Also, I found that having a husband and a child, it was different than my experience as a married woman with a child was very different than some of my friends who were young single women who were living on their own. We had some single women who were living with host families, and that seemed to be okay. And of course, me with my husband and my son, I was okay. But yeah, we had, the only issues I knew of were some young single women who were just rooming together, and that was a little bit difficult for them. But yeah, I never had any issues or times I felt that I was in danger or anything.